Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Caeli Quinn, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of Climate Rise. Welcome to the first ever virtual Climate Rise. There are nearly 300 of us who have taken up the challenge to demonstrate our creativity and kindness for our fellow humans and nonprofits in this time of crisis. The creativity is absolutely astounding. People are baking, knitting, writing poetry, solo kayaking, solo running, and biking. People are making masks, delivering food to veterans, joining with their book clubs to read books about the climate crisis. And for this, we are grateful and deeply inspired. I'd like to begin with a brief history of Climate Rise, the organization. It's particularly important because more than half the people on Rise today are new to Climate Rise. Our full history can be found on our website, as well as the impact of our grants over the past 10 years. So I encourage you to visit and learn more. We began Climate Rise in 2008 as a group of bike guides who wanted to create the first cycling challenges to support the environment and bike advocacy. Our first ride was from New York City to Washington, D.C., and over 100 people signed up for that event. At the end, we met with our members of Congress, uniting that idea of adventure and advocacy. Over the years, we've continued to add more rides and then hikes and runs. Last year, we had over 600 people sign up and fundraise for our Climate Rise events, and we delivered more than $800,000 in grants to conservation, climate, and active transportation efforts around the country. Since 2008, we've granted $6.1 million to climate conservation and active transportation. And this was completely new. This had not been done before, uniting environment with bike advocacy. But Climate Rise is not just about raising funds. It is about building an active and engaged audience who are a force for change. We recognize how little goes to support the environment. Of the roughly $140 billion that Americans gave to charity last year, less than 3% went to support the environment, and that included animal welfare and conservation efforts. I believe we can change this, and that you are the beginning of this great wave of change. We wanted to hear from the beneficiary organizations who are represented here today exactly how the current crisis has impacted them. We expected stories of layoffs, imminent closures, and other struggles, and there were plenty of those. But we also heard deeply inspiring stories. Organizations like Earth Justice are continuing the fight. They are doing everything in their power to avoid any interruption in their free representation of their clients. And they pledge to do what they do best, challenging lawlessness and pushing relentlessly for solutions. At Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition, they are undergoing a budget shortfall. And due to the crisis, they could no longer do education at schools, but they are adjusting, switching to an online program, and even partnering with a nonprofit farm to deliver seedlings via bike trailers to over 400 families so that they can grow their own food and garden. At Bike East Bay, they've rapidly responded in one of the hardest hit communities in this country, working to ensure that the original shelter-in-place order included biking as an essential activity and bike shops as essential businesses. Since then, they have helped the city of Oakland to create 74 miles of slow streets so people can walk and bike safely. At Grid Alternatives, they provide solar panels in low-income homes. COVID-19 shutdowns have made it so that most solar installations cannot happen, and the majority of their staff has been cut to half-time or less. But they are using this time to figure out how to tailor those services to those most impacted by COVID-19. Since their service community is mostly low-income families, they anticipate a greater need for energy cost savings and green job training after this crisis. At National Parks Conservation Association, like all nonprofits, they are worried about the economic downturn and how it will affect their mission. Unfortunately, this administration's attacks on public lands, clean air, water, and wildlife and climate have not let up. In fact, they have greatly increased while we're all distracted by the crisis. And so at NPCA, while their staff works remotely, they remain committed as ever to protecting our national parks. At the Glacier Conservancy here in Montana, they are working separately but together to continue to provide critical philanthropic support to help preserve Glacier National Park. And like many other groups, the California Straw Building Association had to postpone a major event. And David Arkin, their co-director and an 8-time climate writer, wanted us to let you know that they are making many of their past conference sessions and other resources available online, making more information accessible. And as well, they've doubled down on promoting their book, Straw Bale Building Designs, which has incredible information on carbon storing building materials. Other groups, like Rails to Trails Conservancy, today is usually the day they have their big trail celebration today, but they've had to pivot and go virtual, even as trails and outdoors have taken on an even bigger role as an outlet for people during COVID. And RTC has been working around the clock to provide up-to-date public health information and trail status information so that we can decide if we can be outside right now. And if you have a moment today, stop by the Rails to Trails Facebook page as they celebrate trails on a live stream. And again, here in Montana, Free Cycles Missoula had to shut down their community bike shop, but still they are using this time to make proposals to bring about single lane roundabouts, switching from asphalt to clay pavers, bringing back the passenger train, improving and expanding bus service, and connecting a regional Montana trail system. This crisis has affected us all. It is a health crisis. It is an economic crisis. But our health and the health of our planet are deeply connected. We can forget that this crisis is also an environmental crisis. Today, we are teaming up to show our beneficiary organizations that we have their backs and that we know that without their work, the crisis would be much worse. Another organization that has done extraordinary work on climate change and is recommitting to that mission now is 350.org. On Earth Day, they will be hosting a big virtual event. And today we are fortunate to be joined by their founder, Bill McKibben. Hi, Bill.
Hello, it's very, very good to see you.
Thank you and welcome to this group of nearly 300 participants. Some are watching us on the live stream on our website, but we're so grateful you're here and really look forward to hearing from you. So thank you, Bill. Take it away.
Well, what a pleasure to get to join you for a little while. You know, I'm most probably best known for writing a bunch of books about climate change, but also on my resume is 25 bike tours of the Adirondacks. So, and I've had the real privilege over the years of getting to welcome some of the climate rides as they pulled up at the Capitol in DC, ride the last few miles with people and give a talk and things. And I've, from the very beginning, which seems a long time ago now, admired immensely the spirit and hard work and esprit de corps of everybody at Climate Ride. And it makes me happy always just to think about people out there churning the pedals from, you know, now all over the world to make this happen. Let me just give you a few brief updates if you want to kind of where we stand and what the organizations that you guys are supporting, the kind of really good work that they're doing at the moment. Obviously, we're in the midst of a crazy moment in our lives that we haven't experienced before. And there are no silver linings or upsides to it or anything. But if we're going to go through this much trauma, we might as well learn something in the process. And I think we are learning some things as we go along. If I was going to list the kind of basic understandings that I think are driving more deeply into the American consciousness right now, they begin with the idea that physical reality is real, which sounds like a hard, like a dumb and obvious thing to say. But for so many of us who spend our lives enmeshed in screens and things, it gets easy to forget what the ultimate powers on our planet are. I've spent the last 30 years trying to remind people that physics and chemistry are real and that you can't spin them or negotiate with them or force them to compromise or whatever. And the last few weeks has been a reminder that biology is real too. and it doesn't make any difference. You can stand at your lectern in the Oval Office and announce that it's all a hoax or that it's going to go away in a few days or whatever it is, because you don't want to have to deal with it, but that doesn't do anything. Biology gets to set the limits here. If it tells us, if the COVID microbe tells us that we need to stand 6 feet apart, then 6 feet apart we shall stand. Just in the same way that if physics and chemistry tell us that 350 parts per million CO2 is the most we can safely have in the atmosphere, we'd be fools to, to, to not listen to those limits. Second part of that, corollary to it, is I think that people are learning that delay is fatal and that timing is really important. When we look at the coronavirus crisis, the US and South Korea had their first cases on the same day in January. The South Koreans went to work, disrupted things some, no big gatherings, test everybody. They're kind of looking at this thing in the rear view mirror now, instead of it crashing through the front windshield like here, because we didn't do that. We delayed. Cases will go to zero. There'll be an Easter miracle, blah, blah, blah. And none of that obviously was going to happen. And so now we have to not only truly disrupt our lives, but we're going to pay a huge price in any event. The corollaries to the climate crisis couldn't be clearer. If, when scientists had first sounded the warning 30 years ago, we'd begun to flatten the carbon curve, then we might not have solved this problem by now, but we'd be on the way. Instead, we did just the opposite. But we still have to move as quickly as possible. That's the basic bottom line. And I think the third thing that we're really starting to take on board is social solidarity is crucial in these kinds of battles. One of our former presidents once remarked jovially that the scariest 9 words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." But it turns out those aren't the scariest words. The scariest words are things like, "We've run out of ventilators," or "The hillside behind your house is on fire now," or something like that. So we need to be able to work together to build the kind of institutions, including government institutions, that can deal with these crises. The crisis has also made clear precisely the depths to which the fossil fuel industry will sink to keep doing what they're doing. I try not to get angry, and I don't get angry very often, but I must say the news that the people building the Keystone Pipeline had decided to start work in the middle of a pandemic, pulling in construction workers from around the country to remote parts of the nation with bad rural healthcare systems and on the edge of Indian reservations where historically populations have been dropped by 90% by introduced pandemic. That was enough to really make me angry. That kind of level of greed and irresponsibility is one of the things that's driven this crisis for so long. So it was with enormous pleasure to see a couple of days ago that a federal court had reinstated the permitting process that the Trump administration had tried to ignore for the Keystone Pipeline. And there seems to be another roadblock. And the reason I bring it up here is because the reason we got this favorable court ruling and is because, grantees like Earth Justice never, ever stop fighting this stuff, never, ever give up. And that's really been the story of the climate movement. You could go down the whole list of people that you guys have been supporting, top to bottom, and just the incredible admiration for what a diverse and committed movement there is. As we come out of this crisis, we've got to figure out how to use what we've learned to deal with the crisis that's bearing down on us. It's not like that one stops, and it's not like the world's going to restrict itself to one crisis at a time. Even as we're dealing with coronavirus, we're watching some of the horrors of the climate catastrophe continuing. I talk a lot with our colleagues in Africa, where they're dealing with plague of locusts like people have never seen before, because we had anomalous rainy weather at just the wrong moments, and now there are swarms of millions upon billions of locusts that can eat as much food in a day as 100,000 people, just sweeping across fields where, through countries that are locked down trying to fight the pandemic and can't rise to respond. Um, um, this is a world that desperately needs the kind of activism and courage represented by people at Climate Rise. And and I will say that I think that there are signs of great reason for hope, even amidst the troubles we're in. Um, the fact that over the last decade, as we've been building the climate movement and as Climate Ride has been helping provide the resources to make that happen, at the same time, um, our brothers and sisters who work on engineering labs around the world have driven down the cost of solar panels and wind turbines by 90%. That's why when you're riding across the countryside in much of America, when you come up over a rise, there's a big wind turbine on the horizon, because that's now the cheapest way to generate power around much of the world. And it means that as we come out of this crisis and we're looking for ways to revive the economy, the clearest, most obvious answer is to do the work, to put up the solar panels and the wind turbines, to retrofit the houses so that they're got decent insulation, to do all the, to build the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, on and on and on. Um, by the way, e-bikes as well as electric cars. Um, um, that's what countries like South Korea are doing as they come out. Their government yesterday said that they would be using a kind of Green New Deal as the platform for their economic recovery. And the German government under Angela Merkel has said much the same thing. So there may, out of the pain that everybody's enduring now, be some hopeful signals about how to move forward. I would just say the one thing we shouldn't do is try and return as fast as we can to exactly the old normal. There's no sense in just setting up the bowling pins at the end of the alley again. We've got to think more creatively. And I've been so happy to see people thinking more creatively. We're heading on to Earth Day next week. It's the 50th anniversary of the first Earth Day. We can't be in the streets like we planned. We can't be doing massive civil disobedience. We'd planned to have people sitting in the lobbies of half the 5,000 Chase Bank branches in America, because they're the biggest funder of fossil fuels at this point. We can't do that, but people have figured out all kinds of creative things to do. This 3 days of Earth Day live streaming beginning Wednesday will be remarkable, much of it being kind of led by the young people from Climate Strike and Fridays for the Future, but there's going to be some really remarkable stuff on there. And people are figuring out smart things like how to digitally take over the web pages of all the banks and things that are in the way here. So keep your eyes tuned. There's room for activism. And in the meantime, I hope there's a question or two that I can answer, but let me just say, I hope that as many of you as possible are still in places where at least you can get outdoors for a little while. I've found it of enormous comfort to be able to, there's a swamp at the end of our road, and in the last 10 days or so, the wood frogs have come out, which is they're quacking is the first real sign of spring in our part of the world. And now the woodcocks are in their mating dance, and trees are just beginning to bud out. And all of that is a reminder that the world continues to turn, and that the traumas of the moment are very real and very painful, but that they will give on to a day when, above all, we'll be able to get back together and see each other and, you know, ride in a pace line, not just off by ourselves all the time. So many thanks for the work that everybody is doing. Such a pleasure to get to look at the pictures of all the old rides and to contemplate the ones that are coming ahead. So Caeli and everybody else, such thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Are you willing to take a few questions?
Of course.
All right. Well, from David Cole, could you please speak to the Green New Deal as we come out of this pandemic? What may be the steps?
I mean, the Green New Deal in some form is clearly going to be one of the recipes for recovery. And I think that it'll be interesting to watch as the, Biden campaign and other things go on, like how much of this they adopt and in what forms. It's not like it's completely all written out and decided, but the basic idea that we need a massive ramp up of support for renewable energy and energy efficiency is really important now. I mean, clearly we're going to be spending money. That's what the federal government's going to be doing to get the economy kind of revived. And we should spend it on stuff that's going to pay off over the years, especially pay off in not producing more expensive crises that we have to react to. And the good news about renewable energy in a country that suddenly has unemployment rates like it hasn't seen in decades is that it's labor intensive. Fossil fuels, capital intensive. It takes a lot of money to drill an oil well, but it doesn't take that many people. But a solar panel, solar panels do not put themselves on roofs by themselves. Someone has to get up there and swing a hammer to make it happen. And that's precisely the kind of work we need to be doing now. The work to insulate homes and to put in air source heat pumps instead of the, oil furnace in the basement. The work to do all the things around the country that are required to build a working society. That's really what the Green New Deal envisions. That and a certain amount of social solidarity, like I was describing before. Things that we're now realizing are really important. Like, now we know that if people don't have access to decent healthcare, they have to go to work even if they're sick, and that's how pandemics spread. So we got a lot of work to do, but I gotta say, it's been powerful to watch most of our neighbors figure out that they're capable of change and that they're willing to change in order to protect everyone. So I've been really impressed by how most people have buckled down. Yeah, there are a few knuckleheads who went off on spring break and whatever, but all things considered, not so bad.
Thank you. From Scott Warner, Science Magazine just had several articles about us being in the start of a mega drought, of which human actions have likely exacerbated this situation. What new messages do you have based on the work in these articles?
Yeah, there's a big study that came out this week, and it indicates that the mega drought underway in the kind of Southwest in the Colorado River Basin is maybe the deepest ever, certainly in, since Europeans arrived on these shores, and that it's directly linked to climate change. And it's not just that it's a deep drought, of course, it's a deep drought that occurs at a time when the Southwest suddenly has tens of millions of people living in it, with enormous cities and so on and so forth. The Colorado, all of you who are Westerners know, is a thin thread through that part of the world. And trying to rely on it wasn't easy even in the best of times. And now when it gets hot, those reservoirs evaporate, the snowpack melts early. We don't get the flows that we're used to. So it's, one more reminder of why quick action now is required, not to stop climate change. That's no longer on the menu, just to keep it from getting so out of control that it kneecaps our civilizations.
Thank you. One question from Ethan Avey. Do you think Larry Fink wrote his CEO letter as a result of pressure from the Stop the Money pipeline and other efforts?
I not only think it, I know it. BlackRock Asset Management is the biggest, well, something like $1 in 8 in the world rests in their digital vaults. They're the biggest box of money on planet Earth. And they've come under a lot of pressure from a lot of us over the last while. And they actually issued a very forthright and interesting statement about climate change in January and about how it's going to drive all their work going forward. Now, we'll find out if, how much of that was talk and how much of it was real, and everyone will keep pushing them and things. But it's a reminder that when people work together to pressure these guys, we can get change to happen. And it's a reminder, and this is important, that change doesn't just come from pressuring governments. Governments are important, but the other big lever in our world is the financial lever. And in some ways, that's an easier one to pull, because when change happens there, A, it happens fast, which is not a feature of our government, at least anymore, and B, it happens globally. Washington doesn't run the world anymore, but Wall Street kind of does. And so when you can force change at a place like BlackRock and get somewhere, and these are guys who've poured $250 billion in the fossil fuel industry since the Paris Climate Accords. You need, Trump to pull us out. Chase Bank was doing its best to pull us out right from the start. So we got to stand up on all fronts.
And one from Patrick Colleran. Bill, with lower emissions worldwide, do you think this will help people become more accustomed to polluting less after coronavirus?
Patrick, very good question. And what a pleasure to see your backdrop too in our last snow melted in the woods of Vermont a few days ago. So my Nordic skiing season is over, I'm sad to say, but oh well. I think that's a really interesting question, and I think it's probably happening here and around the world. Once people get some sense of clean air, it's a little harder to force them back into their hazy box, That's why the first Earth Day was so important. It was a reaction to dirty air in this country, and truly dirty air, like we can't even imagine anymore. And once it had started to clean up, there was no going back. Well, right now, in large parts of the world, people have cleaner air than they've had in a very long time. It's literally true to say that there are a lot of people on our planet who are getting their first lung fills of clean air ever in the last few weeks. I mean, we're very worried, and correctly, about lung damage from coronavirus. That's how one of the ways it does its dastardly work. If you went to Delhi, where I've spent a fair amount of time, the pollution in recent years has gotten so bad that we think of the 5 million children in Delhi, 2.5 million have irreversible lung damage just from breathing the air. And that's entirely unnecessary. I mean, that's a city that could easily run on e-bikes and e-scooters and, everything else. They've got renewable energy resources of the highest order, if they employed them. One hopes that this will allow people to see what they've been living through and then to make, therefore, some demands on their leaders. There were parts of India, cities in India, where people had not seen the Himalayas for decades. And in the last 2 weeks, the air is cleared to the point where suddenly there's an enormous, the world's biggest mountain range is, visible to the north. Think about that. Think about how that would change your, worldview.
All right, here is a really important question, Bill, from Tim. On the light side, what's your favorite bike?
Well, so this, this is a sad question now for me. Not completely, actually. I found the right solution. I have two bad vertebrae in the up my spine, which at a certain point started to make hours bent over just not much fun anymore. And so after a while, I switched to riding. You'll laugh, and people always laugh when they see them, but riding this thing called an elliptigo, an elliptical bicycle, where you can stand up and pedal as if you're an elliptical machine and you move right along. I mean, I live on Middlebury Gap in Vermont, which is one of the great training sites for real good cyclists. And I can happily make my way up the gap on my elliptical bike. And I've come to love it. You're, you know, at the top of the stroke, you're standing 7 feet above the ground and looking out, sort of surveying the, because I sort of tend to fall into the thing where I'm kind of staring at the road in front of me or the, you know, rear end in front of me or whatever if I'm on a bike. So if anybody else is having back issues ever on a bike, check out these elliptical bicycles. They're and I can, you know, I keep up with my wife on her road bike. I can keep up with her on my elliptical most of the time. So not the worst thing in the world, I gotta say. It's just good to be out.
It is good to be out. Thank you so much for joining us, Bill. It was an absolutely fascinating conversation, and we're grateful for all of your work. Should we give you a big, quiet applause? Have a great
Take care, y'all.
Take care. Thank you.
See you on the road.
Bye. Yep. All right. I'd like to introduce our logistics manager, Patrick Colleran. Go for it, Patrick.
All right. Well, yeah, huge thanks to Bill. You've been such a great leader in this movement for so long, and we just appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. So it is so great to see so many people sign up for this event. We probably still have people registering. When we first launched this, we were thinking maybe 100 people, maybe we'd raise 20 grand, get some people out on their bikes. But the response has been so incredible. I think we're over 280 people signed up. We blew our first fundraising goal out of the water. And, fundraising does seem really difficult right now. There's a lot of people that are going through tough times and there's a lot of uncertainty. But, as we've heard about some of our beneficiaries and some of these issues, especially after talking to Bill, we can have more than one crisis at a time, and the climate and environment are in crisis. And it's more crucial than ever to continue supporting the organizations and the missions of our beneficiary network. So, we just want to make this event as big and as great as we can. And we hope that you will all partake, not only in this, you're here now, but we want to just make a splash on the internet and globally with this Climate Rise event by taking it all virtual. So while you're out doing your activities today, I just encourage you to post more than you've ever posted before. Be that social media guru that you never thought you could be. You're all influencers. Maybe not getting paid by, BMW or anything like that, but you are influencers, and we want to take it viral today with Climate Rise and do great work for our beneficiaries, both in fundraising and just creating awareness about these issues and the work that these beneficiaries are doing and how essential they are to our communities. So I would just also encourage you to post on all the platforms that you have an account with. Try going live on Facebook or YouTube, do Instagram stories. People will love to see your face. I mean, being socially distanced for as long as we have been and as long as we might be, I know all of your friends and family will love to see what you're up to, and they're all probably getting pretty tired of, their shows, and they've caught up on all the, movies and things that they haven't watched in a while. So they want something fresh, and seeing your face while you're out gardening or bike riding or just talking about the organizations that you love will be really exciting for them. Even though you might think going live on YouTube, no one would watch that. I guarantee people want to see what you're up to. So Also, I would encourage you to, talk a lot about why you're doing what you're doing today. The stories we've already heard are really inspiring, and we want you to share that with your networks. So if you've donated yourself, mention it. And anytime you post about what you're doing, progress on your project or your ride or your activity, definitely leave that fundraising page link on the post. You don't have to make a hard ask like, will you donate $50? But give people the opportunity to do something. By leaving that link and softening that ask a little bit, they will love to have an opportunity to be a part of a solution. Times are kind of tough right now. A lot of people have a little more idle time and they don't really know what to do. So giving them an opportunity to do something today will be huge. And I think that they will thank you for it and they will rise up to the challenge. And last thing about those posts, whenever you are posting, please use the hashtag Climate Rise and hashtag Climate Ride. That way, all of us can see all the cool things that are happening today. And, when you search those hashtags on different social media platforms, you'll get to tune in and see how we're all connected across the country despite being socially distanced. In addition to that, we'll have the live stream on our website at climateride.org/rise. That's climateride.org/rise. And Mackenzie in our office is going to be highlighting some of the things that you are doing, featuring live streams of piano performances, posting all the cool things that you guys are posting so that it'll be kind of like a, news channel of what's going on in the world with Climate Rise. And, just to give you a couple highlights of things that are going on today, we have a team of Zwifters that are trying to raise $2,000. They probably already have. One of those Zwifters, Dennis Damaris, longtime climate rider, he's planning on spending 12 hours on the bike. So nonstop, 12 hours biking in place. Some of his teammates are expecting him to lap them while they're out because he's such a strong cyclist. We have the Haynes family. They're Team Haynes, not the underwear. And they are doing an assortment of things. They are going to bake donuts. They're going to have a whole family band concert. They're going to pick up litter and paint a spring art piece. So it's just so cool to see families get involved. Everybody has an opportunity to do something about these issues. A lot of times it's not really clear what that is, but we can see with this event and a creativity of the Climate Ride community that really anything can turn into action on these issues. Just a couple more highlights. We have Gary Justice. I know he already started his marathon around his neighborhood. I saw him take a lap on Facebook Live this morning, so shout out to Gary. And Sarah Tolchin is planning on climbing 18,700 stairs. Sarah, hopefully you've already started that. That sounds like quite the endeavor, but we're excited to see how that goes for you today. One more thing I want to mention is our generous supporter and longtime board member, John Grossman, is really generously kicking things off with a $1,000 match. So any donations that come in, no matter how large or small, starting at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, so in about 22 minutes, those first $1,000 in donations will be matched. So if you're out there fundraising and posting and get a donation, that can be doubled really quickly. So pretty good way to kick things off. And thank you so much for everyone for tuning in and rising up to this challenge. And we're so excited to see what you're all up to today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our ride director, Blake Holiday.
Hello, everybody. I am Blake Holiday, your virtual ride director, and so excited to be here. Rise and shine, as we say, on this day. I want to thank everyone who joined the call. There's like over 100 people here, so it's really cool to see everybody out there and excited to do stuff today and in coming days. And it's also great to see so many familiar faces. I've gotten so many private messages on this, I can barely respond to them all. But so thank you, everybody. Hello. And yes, this is my lockdown beard. So everyone's commenting about that. I wanted to thank Bill McKibben. Normally I would give like a safety talk right now, but instead I'm just going to thank people and send you off. I also want to just give a heartfelt happy thanks to our staff here at Climate Ride. Everyone's pitched in so many ways to make this happen on a very short time frame. This call is going pretty well, considering not too many technical glitches so far, so fingers crossed. But anyway, I wanted to thank especially Caeli Quinn, our executive director. Her leadership has been amazing through the last couple of weeks, you know, in our crisis basically as an organization. And, you know, having to cancel rides and postpone events and reschedule events, it's been a little bit crazy, just like what everyone's going through. So I just wanted to thank our staff. We have the best 5 folks ever that I've ever worked with, so it's been great. As Patrick said, remember to head over to climateride./rise to watch the live feed, follow what other people are doing. There could be technical glitches over there, so hang in there. You might have to refresh. Email Mackenzie with your activity updates. If you've made it halfway through whatever you're doing and you need some support, he'll help you out over there. And you can send him an email at info@climateride.org. That's the best place to reach him, info@climateride.org, and give him an update, and then we'll update other people on what you're doing. As Patrick mentioned, if you're not planning on fundraising, put up your link in your posts. You might as well. I just got a notification that we passed $46,000 raised so far for all of our hardworking beneficiaries. So that's really exciting and amazing, considering you know, everything that's going on today. So thank you so much. All of you are making a huge difference. Really great. We hope from Climate Ride that we're going to be able to run some trips in the fall and hopefully, you know, early next year. We're obviously monitoring the situation, but make sure you check back on our website to see what's happening, see what we're offering, and of course, we're going to always stay within safety guidelines and local jurisdictions and things like that. But we're pretty excited about some of the events we have planned coming up. So when we all emerge from this crisis, we're going to be definitely looking at some really cool ways that we can get back together, as well as new safety guidelines and new protocols and things during our rides themselves. So make sure that you sign up for our e-newsletter. If you haven't signed up for it yet, that's where you get most of the updates. So you can do that at climateride.org as well. All right, so I think it's time that we get started on our activities. I myself, at 1 o'clock Pacific time, I'm going to be playing my piano. I play ragtime piano for myself at home because I find it relaxing and fun. But ragtime is a really fun, happy medium, so I thought it would help make people happy. But I am terrified to be playing music online live in front of other people, sort of virtually. So check me out at 1 o'clock Pacific. I'll be in the feed as well. And before we go, I think Patrick or Mackenzie is going to unmute all of our microphones, which is very. He's going to unmute the microphone so that we can make some noise, have a big
time, 2 times, 3 times, even 4 times, depending upon how they trip it.
On 1, 2, 3, we'll just do a big shout and big.
Hey!
Hey!
Hi!
Mackenzie is going to unmute.
Hi, Morgan. Hi, the Black Man.
He's going to unmute the microphone so we can make some noise. And we will see you online. All right. Thank you all again. Bottom of my heart.